That was a great response. All right. Well, I know that some of you are still eating, so please continue to do that. No problem. But we're going to jump in. I can't see anybody because of these lights, so I'm just going to have to do this a little bit. But we'll get there. I'm going to come down a little bit. I hope the camera, can you follow me if I come down? All right, good, because I can't deal with being up there. So, can I ask everyone to get good posture in their seats, please? I don't know what that means, whatever that means for you. Some of you are like, so maybe like, I don't know, sit up, take a nice long inhale and an exhale. Bring yourself into the room. You've sat through 2 long sessions already. Probably got some stuff going on in your heads. Thinking about, hopefully, things that you might do differently over the next couple of days, weeks, months, years. Just by brief introduction, my name is Mark Brackett, and my day job is I'm a professor at Yale. I run what's called the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I have been there for 22 years. And our center does 2 primary things. We are a bunch of scientists who really care about research, who want to understand the science of emotions and the skills of emotional intelligence and why do those skills matter and what do they mean for people's lives. And then we also work in the field of social and emotional learning. We have an approach to SEL that's called Ruler that is in about 5,000 schools across the United States and many other countries, including Italy, Spain, China, Australia, and Mexico. And so today what I'm going to do is give you kind of a brief kind of background about the most current thinking around social and emotional learning. And then I'm just going to share with you a case study of how we've been doing this work. And I see some of our friends here in the audience. So thank you to our team who created this new little QR code. Thank you, Erin, for that. And I'm looking at a screen that's not there over there. There it is. So if you want to get more information today, in the age of the digital world, use QR codes, I guess. So you can just go to that QR code and you can download information about readings, about free apps, websites, and social media. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about the following question. Think about today's youth when they're in their 20s. What do we hope for them? And if you are someone of youth, what do you hope for yourself? Just take a moment and think about that, please. Like we're going to do a little prospection. We're going to think about the future. We're going to think about today's high school students. When you think about yourself being 25, 30 years old, what do you want for yourself as parents, as educators? What are you hoping for those youth? Success. I didn't ask you to speak out loud, but it's okay. Impulse control. Just kidding. Okay. Just take a moment and think about that. Maybe turn to a partner and you're going to give you 10 seconds to do that. Just 10 seconds with a partner. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Don't hate me for that. I'm sorry? Smile to everything. That's a lot to ask for. So everyone, take a look at the screen. On the count of 1, 3, 2, 1. These are the results of multiple studies that we have done with parents and with educators and with students themselves. Did anyone get any of them right? Not that it's the right answer or anything like that. But think about that. Happiness and well-being, persistence and resilience, purposeful work and career satisfaction, kindness, compassion, and respect for others, meaningful and healthy relationships, social responsibility and civic mindedness, and financial security is a good one too. Do you notice that on the list, it doesn't say things like the highest GPA possible, or the best SAT scores, or the greatest letters of recommendation? No. It doesn't even say, I want my child to be an expert in math or science or language arts. All important things. But when we really think about what we want for ourselves and we want for youth, these are the things that come up, these are the things that are in people's mind. So my question to you is, how much does our education system focus on the development of the things that are going to lead to that? Why is everybody so quiet? I was born alone. I guess I'm going to do this presentation alone. What do you think? Do we spend enough time helping people build and maintain healthy relationships, find well-being and happiness? Probably not enough. And that's why we have a field called social and emotional learning. So this is an overwhelming framework, but it's a good one, which basically says that at the core of what we call social and emotional learning are critical competencies, like self-awareness, like social awareness, like being able to deal with one's own feelings, self-management, being able to be in healthy relationships, relationship management, making sound decisions. And as we've learned from the panels thus far, these are not skills that someone just learns on their own. I know Lady Gaga's mom is here, and I know Cynthia, but we weren't born that way. I might get in trouble for that one. No, I'm just kidding. We're born in a certain way, but we got to learn these skills. Does that resonate with you? How many of you think you're born with an area of your brain that has lots of words to describe your feelings? How many of you feel like you're born with a brain that is filled with research-based strategies to help you deal with your feelings? I got one heckler in the audience. We're just not. We're not born with those skills. We have to learn those skills. And we learn them in classrooms, in schools, with our families, and in our communities. And that's the formal definition of SEL. It's about knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and professional goals. What we know from our research, don't read this slide, I'm just going to tell you the details. Most people think it's important. You ask educators, they say it's a matter. They want to do it, they think it's important. You ask employers, they're saying, recently I was giving a speech to about 50 CEOs, and I asked them, what are the hoped-for skills that you want in your employees? The top 1, 2, 3, good collaboration skills, emotional intelligence, creativity. Now, for those of you who are researchers in the room, or people who like research, and for people who don't really know a lot about research, this is an important study that was done by colleagues at our center. And essentially, it's called a meta-analysis. And what a meta-analysis is it's a study of many studies. So in the field of social and emotional learning, there are about 424 studies done over the last 20 or so years with over 575,000 students in kindergarten through high schools. And what that research shows is the following, that when you do this work with quality, yes, children do develop those 5 skills I just shared with you. Yes, increases in pro-social skills, better connections, better school climate, increased civic attitudes and behaviors. Students do better in school, higher academic achievement, better engagement, homework completion, and all the things that we've been talking about this morning around mental health go down. That means that when you do this work well in a model of prevention, not waiting for something to happen, not waiting for depression or anxiety to occur and treating it, which is important, but instead focusing on the early development of these skills. When you do that, in controlled experiments, you find that there's less anxiety, stress, depression, suicidality, aggression, and bullying. Now, some of you may know this if you're in policy. Anybody here in policy? Raise your hand. Few policy people. Anybody here, who here works or does work in schools? Okay, a lot of you, wonderful. There's some pushback lately about this thing called social and emotional learning. Anybody familiar with the pushback? Well, Florida, we're not in Florida, we're in New York. They say it's going to float out into the sea someday. No, I shouldn't say that. Erase that from the video. So, I just want to clarify some things, please. The first is that people are making commentaries that SEL is about teaching sex education. And I want to say something up front, right? SEL does not teach sex education. However, I'm standing here as a gay man. I can tell you from my own lived experience and from what I know from the research, LGBTQIA+ students are suffering. And they're suffering at greater levels than their cisgender and straight peers. We care about all children, but we do need to identify the fact and be real that our LGBTQ+ students are at risk. And so what we want to make sure we do in schools is focus on belonging and inclusion. We want to make sure that a child with any identity feels safe, feels seen, feels heard. That's got to be the goal, that every child, equity has to be about when you look across the board, if there's a child who's suffering, we're finding ways to reduce that suffering. And that has to be for all identities. The second challenge is that people have made the claim that SEL is about teaching critical race theory. SEL is not about critical race theory. What it says here is it's not a history, it's not a sociology or a legal studies program. That should be a period there. However, because racism is a serious societal problem, we know that. We don't need any more TV episodes about this. We don't need any more memorials. It's clear, both from just observation and the research, that racism exists in our society. However, our goal with SEL is to create learning environments where children just learn the skills to improve listening, to build perspective-taking skills, to have that empathy, to be able to understand others' differences. Another critique is that SEL perpetuates the systemic abuse of children of color. The research does not support that. What the research does support is that SEL is doing well for most children, if not all children at this point. However, I think it's critically important to understand that we all have biases. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I grew up in, I'm Jewish, but I grew up in a white Catholic area of New Jersey. All I was familiar with was white people with dark hair. That's what I witnessed growing up in my childhood. And so by definition, I'm going to be not biased necessarily, but I'm going to be better at understanding people who look like me, who sound like me, or they didn't even look like me or sound like me, but that's what I was observing. I got involved in the martial arts as a way of self-protection because I had a pretty tough childhood with bullying, and I got the opportunity to go to Korea. Let me tell you, it was a whole nother world trying to understand Korean culture. I had no background in Korean culture. So here I am walking around the streets of South Korea, trying to read people's facial expressions, their body language, understand their behavior, no familiarity with it. By definition, we are going to be more skilled at understanding and dealing with people who look like us, who sound like us. We're going to be less skilled at understanding people who are different from us. And we just have to be aware of that and have that culture responsive lens and have that awareness of being the learner and not the knower. Some other challenges is that SEL takes away time from core subject areas like language arts and science and math. As it says here, it takes time. There's no doubt about it. We're asking people to do something different, to do something new. So we're going to dedicate time to teaching social and emotional learning, definitely. At the same time, what we know is that students in classrooms where there is SEL, as I showed you from the research, are more engaged in learning. They're more attentive. And importantly, they perform better in school, academically. So there are clear benefits to the time that is spent doing social and emotional learning. Also, when you think about it, the best educators are doing this automatically. They're integrating it into their teaching practices. It's integrated into the curriculum. Another challenge that we've had with the field recently is that it's therapy. How many of you have ever had someone call you and say, I've had a rough day? Anyone? Hello? Yes? And you just say like, I don't know how to deal with that. Good luck, goodbye. We don't do that, right? We talk to people. We are social creatures. We want to be in relationship. We want to connect with people. That's what social emotional learning is. It's being prevention focused. It's helping children build emotion vocabularies. It's helping them learn strategies to support them in dealing with their feelings. And then the last bullet here is that it's indoctrinating children to think and feel a certain way. There is no political agenda with social and emotional learning, and there should never be a political agenda with anything related to social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning is about healthy child development. That is not a red or a blue conversation. It is an everyone's conversation. And so when you think about the idea that it's indoctrinating people, what I want to share is that it's just the opposite. In the work that we do specifically, we're helping children build language. We're helping them build strategies, and the ones that work for them. Just to give you an example, I'm a neurotic introvert. I worry about everything, and I don't like people. Just kidding. This is a tough group. I mean, I can't even use humor. Gosh. So anyhow, I'm being honest with all of you. I am a little neurotic. I worry about everything. I worry about why I worry. I even worry about why I worry about why I worry. Thanks, Mama. And I'm kind of shy. People think I'm outgoing because I do presenting, but I will be depleted after this talk and want to run away to a little room by myself. And so the things that I might need to restore my energy might be different. Anyone here like you like to party? Anyone? Yeah, I can see. You like to party, I can tell. And so like what you need and what I need are two different things. My job is not to make you do the things that I need to do to restore myself. My job in teaching social and emotional learning is to help you find the things that are going to work best for you, given how you identify. That's the goal of this work. Does that resonate with people? This is why you don't have to be the knower of everything when you teach social and emotional learning. You just got to be the listener. You got to be the co-explorer. Now, I've had the honor of working on an approach to social and emotional learning for about 25 years. And to just give you a brief history, started this work likely when I was around 13 years old. My uncle, who was from New York, who was a teacher in the Catskill Mountains of New York in a little town called Monticello, New York. Anyone know Monticello? Cool. Well, maybe you know my Uncle Marvin. So Uncle Marvin was a band leader by night and a teacher by day. And he struggled. He struggled. He said, why is everybody feeling it in the club, but they're not feeling it in my classroom? He's like, I play the trumpet, everybody's dancing and having fun, and then I teach my 6th grade social studies class, and everybody's like, what's the difference? The difference was feeling. And so he challenged the New York State Association for Reading and Social Studies back at that time to think differently about teaching social studies. Why don't we make it a feelings curriculum? And what he did was he went into the social studies curriculum and he looked at all the characters' experiences and he said, I'm going to reach the children through that lens. I'm going to reach the children through that lens, through having them identify with the experiences of the characters, not just learn history for history's sake. And we worked together. When I was in college, I was not sure what I was going to do with my life, and I was in therapy, and I was reading all these self-help books, and all of a sudden I thought, oh my gosh, this is all the stuff that Uncle Marvin was doing in his classroom 15, 20 years ago. And I pulled my uncle out of retirement, and we started writing a curriculum. And we failed. We failed because we made one mistake. We thought everyone was an Uncle Marvin. And there were people that were afraid of this work. They didn't want to talk about feelings. They thought feelings, we don't do that here. I'm proud to say that, actually, this is a little outdated, that right now we're in about 4,000 to 5,000 schools. We've trained about 120,000 educators, over 4 million students in 27 countries. And so we've learned a lot, running around the world trying to get people to talk about their feelings. And what we know from the work that we've done specifically is that it makes a difference. It makes a difference in children's lives. It makes a difference in the school climate and the classroom climate. It makes a difference in teachers' lives. So again, tremendous research proving that taking social and emotional learning seriously just makes life better. Now it's time to really get into this stuff. So if you know the work that we do, you've probably seen a tool we call the mood meter, el medidor emocional. So now's the time to get a little introspective. I'm going to ask everyone to take a nice long inhale. That's a request. A nice long exhale. You can see on that x-axis it says the word pleasantness. All of you woke up this morning and you looked at your phones and it said you were going to some New York State Youth Mental Health Conference, right? And you're here now. You've probably had a lot of feelings since the moment you woke up this morning to the time you got to this moment right now. I can't deal with your whole life. I can only deal with you here. So I'm going to ask you to check in with your feelings right now. How pleasant are you right now? -5, you're thinking, I can't stand this guy, Mark. I don't like this presentation. I want to go home. -3, you're like, Mark's like every other class I've ever been in. It's kind of blah. Maybe you're neutral. Maybe you're a +3. You're like, oh my gosh, an hour talking about feelings. This is the moment of my life. Maybe you're at +5 in pleasantness. You're looking at me and thinking, oh my gosh, I want Mark to move in. He could be my personal emotion coach every day. So where are you this morning, or now this afternoon? +3. I guess we're going to do this out loud. Seriously, where are you? Are you at +1, -1, +3, -4? That's just what's going on in your head. It's all about what's in your head right now. Are you predicting that this is going to be a good experience? Are you predicting I want out? That's what kids are doing every day, by the way, when they come to your schools or they go to your homes. They're making predictions. It's sometimes subconscious. I want to approach this day. I want to avoid this day. I want to be in your classroom. I don't feel safe and comfortable in your classroom. On the y-axis, it says the word energy. What's your energy like right now? I can tell you, actually. So, -5, you're in your deepest pool of despair. You would need like a spatula to lift you up. -3, you're kind of like, ugh. Then you're at 0, then +1, +2, +3, +5. You can't contain yourself. I get no feeling that anyone is there, just so you know. Where is your energy at? Give yourself a number on the y-axis from -5 to +5. All right, now we're going to cross our axes. You wanted a takeaway. I'm giving you a tool for free to be more self-aware. What could be better than that? How many of you are in the yellow right now? High, energy, and pleasant. Raise your hands. Okay, you can raise your hands a little higher. Green people, your energy is low, but you're feeling pleasant. I got a lot of green in the room. Anybody in the blue or red today? Oh, come on. This is New York City. This is ridiculous. So we haven't built a good relationship, obviously, because no one's being honest with me. There is absolutely no way that everyone in this room is happy. I'm not happy. My hunch is that there's nobody here a little bit nervous, a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit down, a little disappointed, a little... No? You're good? All right, well, I'm going to be you then. All right, I'll let you go. We're going to convert now our box to a specific feeling word. You got 3 seconds. You got 2 seconds. I want that specific feeling word. Freeze. Honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble finding the word? Hands up high. Like really high. Stretch it out. Come on. Freeze. Do not put it down. Everyone look around the room. Even the people who work at the Center for Emotional Intelligence. It's great. All right, you're fired. I'm kidding. So, what's up with that? I mean, all of you are adults interested in mental health and well-being. You're here at a conference, but yet we struggle, even as people interested in this work, with finding the words to describe how we feel. Any hypotheses around that? It's complicated, so we give up on it.
It's not just a skill, it's also a performance that needs practice.
It's a skill and a performance that needs practice. Yes? You have a lot of feelings. Yeah, how many do you have? 3. All right, that's good. 5 or more, and we got some work to do. So we got multiple feelings at once, which is definitely true. We need practice. We need a skill development. What else? Yeah. We haven't really learned the vocabulary. Now, what if I asked you for your strategy to get the most out of the rest of today? How many of you, by the way, quick raise of hands, how many of you will get distracted at some point during my presentation or the end of the day? Wow, that was quick. Great. Welcome to New York State, the world of emotional illiteracy and attention deficit disorder. So what are we going to do? What's your strategy? Like, you're here to learn, right? It's like, what's the purpose of being here if you're not going to take anything away? Like, what'd you do today? I went to a conference. What'd you learn? Nothing. Okay. So when you get distracted, when you get tired, when you get text messages or emails, what's going to be your strategy to come back to learning mode? Some of you are looking at me like I'm talking a foreign language. Let's be honest. How many of you grew up in a household or in a school where you were asked those questions regularly? Like, to learn strategies. We got 1 person here, thank goodness. But 2 people, 3. But we got hundreds of people in the room. Like, really thinking about the strategies we would use to support our health and well-being and focus, decision-making, etc. So here's your cheat sheet. If you want to take a picture of that, you can. That's our mood meter, but with the words built into it. And I'll send these slides out for you. As I said in an earlier presentation, we're not doing so well. Now, it's kind of interesting because the educators in our study, by the way, we've done now studies with like tens of thousands of educators over the last couple of years, and they don't look like they're in that yellow and green quadrant. The number 1 word is anxiety, and then stress and uncertainty and frustration. Students in our research, frustrated, bored, anxious. So obviously you're all very special people because whoever's not in the room is feeling a different way. And the question is, why should we care? Does it matter how people feel? And the answer is 3, 2, 1. Okay, a little bit more enthusiasm. Should we care how people feel? 3, 2, 1. Yes. One more time, because I just need some inspiration. Do we care, or should we care how people feel? 3, 2, 1. Yes. Thank you. Now I'll tell you why. There are 5 reasons that we study and other people study in the world. The first is attention, memory, and learning. Right now, your feelings are driving whether or not you're listening to me. If you are really stressed out about something going on in your family life or in other aspects of your life, your brain is trying to fix that, attend to that. I was a C&D student growing up. I had terrible bullying as a child. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't care about anything that was happening in school. I just wanted to get home safely. Clearly, I'm pretty smart. I mean, look at me. I'm the one standing giving the presentation. So I got some skills. I got some smarts. I couldn't use my smarts as a kid. I was too afraid. I couldn't focus. It wasn't because I wasn't academically able. it was because my emotion system was taking over. I didn't have strategies to deal with my feelings. I didn't even know how I was feeling. When children have more developed skills to understand their feelings and deal with them, they don't have that power over them. When they go to schools that care about how they feel, those feelings don't have the same unfortunate impact. The second is decision making. Has anyone here ever made a bad choice? Would you like to share it publicly? So, we've all made bad choices. We've all said things we've regretted. Emotions are the drivers of our decision making. We like to think we're rational creatures. Our feelings are behind our decisions. The third is relationship quality. Anyone here ever work with or live with someone who is really difficult? Like just difficult to be around. And how many of you, when you think about that person, say to yourself something like, gosh, I just want to hang out with that person every day, all the time. No, we don't want to be around people like that. We want to be around people who are emotionally intelligent. The fourth we spent a lot of time talking about today, physical and mental health, and the fifth is performance. We like to think that our success academically in the workplace is all about what's going on up here cognitively. I'm here to tell you, as someone who's worked at a place like Yale for 20 years, that not every student is successful. If you can't deal with your anxiety, your stress, your frustration, your overwhelm, if you can't deal with feedback, oftentimes you don't achieve your dreams in life. How many of you here have known a child who you just saw all their potential and all of their creativity and talent, but for some reason they couldn't express it? It's not because of their non-creativity. It's because they don't have the skills to deal with the everyday aspects of their lives. Now, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Permission to Feel. I wrote this book because I felt the need to write it and to bring the work that we did at the center out to a wider audience, not just schools. And I was coming up, when I was thinking about the title, which is Permission to Feel, there was a lot of pushback. They're like, ooh, that sounds fluffy. That sounds soft. I can't imagine a male executive picking up in a book, reading something called Permission to Feel. That's not going to go over well. And all the arguments that were made against it were the reasons why I kept it. Because, just to be frank and honest with all of you, today I'm a 53-year-old man. I am happily married to my husband. We've been together as of 2 days ago for 29 years. I know I look like I'm 17, but... And, of course, I forgot about our anniversary, which was a problem, but anyway. Too busy preparing this freaking presentation. But my point really is that as a kid, not only did I have terrible bullying, but just to be honest and open with all of you, I had pretty horrific sexual abuse. So from 5 years old till I was about 10 years old, my parents' closest friend, who was our next door neighbor, was abusing me. I never shared it. I was threatened by the abuser. If I shared what was happening, I would be harmed. My family would be harmed. And guess who I shared my abuse with eventually? It wasn't my parents. It was Uncle Marvin, my uncle. Because my uncle was living with us 1 year in the summer, and he was going to graduate school. And we're sitting in the backyard, and he asked me that one question: how are you feeling? But he did it in a way that no other adult had ever done it with me. I don't know if it was his facial expression, his body language, his vocal tone, but I decided in that moment, now was the time I needed to get that freedom of all that pain. He didn't say, toughen up. He didn't say, oh my gosh. He looked at me and he just said, we're going to get through this together. We're going to get through this. And so I assert that my uncle gave me that permission to feel. Now, I've been on a journey to see how many people have an Uncle Marvin. We keep on hearing about these mentors in life. I'm really interested in the feelings mentors in our lives, the people who create the space for us to be our true, full feeling selves. So now's the time for some reflection, everyone. Did you have an Uncle Marvin? An Aunt Maria? Did you have someone growing up with whom you could be your true self? And here's what the research shows. Only about 45% of us, this is in around 25 to 30,000 people that I've asked this question to over the last year or two. Only about 45% of adults say they had an adult in their life when they were a child who provided those conditions. 55% of us in this room likely didn't have someone like that. Now the question is, what are the characteristics? Good listening skills, empathy, non-judgmental, loving, kind, supportive, open, caring, honest, compassionate, understanding, patient, accepting. I'm going to say that in a nice, soothing voice. Someone who listens to you. Someone who shows empathy and compassion. Someone who's non-judgmental, loving, caring, supportive, patient. Doesn't that sound good? And it feels kind of good to me. What's the opposite? Dismissive, cold, judgmental. Now, something interesting to me is that I've now asked people the question about these aspects of permission to feel. Do you know that of the 45%, only about 5% of people say it was their parent? And then I ask parents about this, and they get upset with me. They're like, well, we like to outsource those kinds of things. I'm like, this isn't like, like football, or soccer. This is like feelings, like your kid here we're talking about. I don't have the time to be an Uncle Marvin for my own child. That's what I get. I don't have the time. So you don't have the time to be a good listener, to be empathic, to be non-judgmental. And you know what the other factor is that people say to me? They say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to be my own child's Uncle Marvin because I'm not sure I can handle what I hear. And for those of you who were in my panel discussion before, you saw that from that mom. This fear. That means that our parents have not had the emotion education they need to even ask their own children the question, how are you feeling? So what gets in the way? What else gets in the way? Time, fear. Anyone? What gets in the way of you being this person for anyone? This is called the audience participation part, by the way. What gets in the way? Your own self gets in the way. Yeah. Thank you for that. Something else that comes up for people. Yes? Yeah, you have to be an authoritative figure for respect. Really important point. And sometimes we just need a friend, right, who listens to us, who is non-judgmental, but we get hung up in that authority piece. Yes? They just don't have the capabilities. They can't handle what they hear, like you're saying, what that mom said to me. They don't know if they have the answers. It's funny because I was doing this conference for leaders, and they said, well, we don't have the skills to fix people. I was like, oy, oy, oy. Nobody wants to be fixed, right? People just want to be in relationship, to have the conversation. Now, at the center, we talk about mindsets. And I'm going to urge all of you to think about becoming an emotion scientist as opposed to an emotion judge. Wouldn't that be incredible? If everyone in this room left with a mindset that there's no such thing as a bad emotion. For years, I thought that the goal of my anxiety was to get rid of it, as if it were possible to go into the amygdala and the hippocampus of my brain and take the anxiety and carve it out and like throw it into a garbage pail. It ain't possible. I've been an anxious person for most of my life. I am blessed that I have a whole new attitude about my anxiety. I don't see it as a bad thing. As a matter of fact, at the center, we only like to hire people who are anxious because they get stuff done. We like anxiety. The people who are interested in mindfulness all the time, like, we don't want you just like breathing and relaxing all the time. We want you to work. I like anxiety. There's good things for anxiety, just so you know. Anxiety can be very beneficial. It can be motivating if it's managed effectively. It's the levels of anxiety. You can go from being concerned to having chronic and toxic stress. We want to avoid the chronic and toxic stress for sure. But moderate levels of anxiety are okay. No such thing as a bad emotion. We want people to be in learning mode like the Uncle Marvins. We want to get granular with the words we use. Raise your hand if at some point during the last couple of years in the pandemic you have failed with dealing with your feelings. Like you just said something like, oh, I shouldn't have said it. Or you drank too much of something. Or you ate too much of another thing. Or you avoided that. Does that sound familiar to anybody? If we have a mindset that this is who I am, there's no hope, we're never going to get anywhere. If we have a mindset that I can learn this stuff, and when I fail, that's an opportunity to learn and grow. That's what you know is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset around feelings. We don't want to be around the emotion judge, closed, critical, like, why are you so angry all the time? Why are you this? Get over it. Move on. My father had a fixed mindset about, he was kind of a lot of anger issues. And he'd say, son, this is the way I deal with stuff. You're going to have to learn to get used to it. Okay, Dad, I guess I'll become a psychologist. There's nowhere to go with that mindset. It's a dead end. There's no hope. There's no help. Now, sorry to put you through this. Who were you raised by? Obviously, my goal is for all of you to go into therapy after this session. I just said SEL wasn't therapy, but that doesn't mean you can't go for therapy. So, what do you think? Were you raised by an emotion scientist? Or were you raised by an emotion judge? We put that in the judge category. What did you learn about emotions growing up in your family? Going to your school. My colleague Robin, who is sitting in front, she and I do this exercise once in a while. We're like, if you were to write the movie or title the movie of your childhood regarding your emotional development, what would you call the movie? Anyone have a good title for their movie? What was your title? What's that? A Nightmare. And you see how we laugh at that? We don't want to laugh. We want to give you sweet dreams, not nightmares. The question is, did we have an emotion education? Did our parents have an emotion education? There wasn't a thing called emotional intelligence when I was growing up. Right? We didn't know there was a way to be smart about your feelings. I was blessed to have been trained in my research career by the developers of a theory of emotional intelligence. And now we talk about them as the ruler skills. The first skill is recognizing emotions. Being self-aware, identifying your emotions. So when I'm looking at your facial expressions right now, I'm trying to figure out, are you interested? Are you bored? Are you overwhelmed? Are you tired? I'm trying to make meaning out of the information that I can glean from all of you. I'm also trying to be self-aware. Like, Mark, how are you feeling right now? What's going on for you in your body? What's going on in your brain? That's recognizing emotions. And here's the challenge, everybody. It's hard. It's hard to read people's facial expressions. Because why? Look at this room. We have people from all different ethnic and racial and cultural backgrounds. We don't all express emotions in the same way. I can do a little study with you right now. Can I use this table here? You look like a friendly group. I'm going to display an emotion. You ready? I'm walking in, I'm your like colleague at work, and I just come in and I just show a feeling. You ready? What do you see? A smirk. What did you see? Friendly. What did you see? Friendly-ish. You want to weigh out.
A little annoyed.
A little annoyed. Annoyed. So you think I'm annoyed, and you think I'm friendly. I got one face, just so you know. So what do we learn from this? Interpretation. Who's right? Only I know. Maybe. But how many of us behave differently towards people by our immediate read of their face? We do. And so we've got to be really careful here because we make a lot of mistakes. The only way to know how someone is feeling is to really get to know them and ask them how they're feeling. Don't try to just, read the book by its cover. And that's another important piece. This is a fancy word, ethnocentrism. But we like to think that our way is the right way with these kinds of things. Like handshaking. I did a talk on Wall Street. It was like, hello, Dr. Brackett. I was like, wow, I need like some testosterone for this presentation. I was like, serious. You go to Korea, Mark-san. Different rules. There's no right or wrong. Eye contact is a big one here, right? We got to look at people in the eye. In some countries, that's disrespectful. So if we're only using our lens to understand people, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. Understanding emotions. Where are these feelings coming from? Why do I feel angry versus disappointed? Why do I feel frustrated versus overwhelmed? What's the difference between anger and disappointment? Who feels like they know the psychological difference between anger and disappointment? Raise your hand if you're confident that you can give me the definition of anger versus disappointment. Wait, I thought all of you were interested in this stuff. No one's taking has the courage to raise their hand? I'm just asking you to define two things. In the back, what's your definitions? Say it again.
Perspective.
Respected?
Perspective.
Perspective, that's an easy way out. I want definitions. I want like Oxford Dictionary. Anger means this, disappointment means that. Yes. Disappointment is when you had an expectation that was not met.
And anger might be when your values were violated.
Anger is when your values are violated. Now we're on point. Disappointment is about unmet expectations. Everything is legit. It just didn't work out. I'm disappointed. Anger is when I perceive an injustice. How could you speak to someone like that? How could you speak to me that way? That is unfair. Good. Now, here's the challenge. That while we need to have a universal language. There's no way around it, otherwise we can't communicate. We got to agree that anger equals injustice. But we also have to agree that everyone in this room is going to experience anger in a different way because of your lived experience. And my job is not to tell you why you shouldn't feel anger. My job is to deeply understand your experiences so that I can support you with your anger. Do you see that? It's really important. Let's take excitement. Anger is a complicated term. Where three of us are on a roller coaster ride. One of us is like, yeah, this is the best roller coaster ride ever. Another one is like, oh my gosh, this is the most boring thing in the whole wide world. And someone else is saying, faster, faster, faster. We're all on the same roller coaster ride. The same thing happens to us. But we have different emotions. We have to understand that different things are going to cause each of us to feel a certain way. And we need to be empathic towards that as opposed to judgmental towards it. The next skill is labeling emotions, having that vocabulary. I gave you one vocabulary test about anger and disappointment. I could do this all day long. Anxiety and stress. Oh my. Everybody's saying they're anxious, everybody's saying they're stressed. What's the difference? Anxiety is about uncertainty. Anxiety is I can't predict what's going to happen next. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Stress is when I got too much on my plate and I don't got the resources to deal with it. They're completely different concepts. How many of you think that the strategy that you would use to deal with anxiety might be different than the strategy you would use to deal with your stress? They're different. With stress, like you can do all the breathing exercises you want, but you're going to come back to having too much stuff on your plate and not enough resources to get it done. So you might need to talk to someone about getting help or take stuff off your plate. Otherwise, the stress ain't going away. I'm going to argue that it's a human right to be self-aware. If we don't have language to describe our experiences, how the heck can we communicate? How the heck can we get our needs met? The next skill is expressing emotions, knowing how and when to express different emotions with different people across context. I gave you that example about the handshake. Hugging is another example. Eye contact is another example. We do need to acknowledge, however, that not everyone has equal permission to express every feeling. There are societal rules around gender. We did a research study recently which showed that as women go higher up in their organization, they feel they have to inhibit their negative emotions more because they're going to be judged others a certain way that's going to inhibit their success. That's another form of equity, gender equity. So these are unjust rules. And that leads to greater suppression. It leads to greater oppression. The final skill of our work is regulating emotions. The thoughts and actions we use to prevent unwanted emotions, reduce the difficult ones, initiate the ones that can be very helpful, maintain emotions, or even enhance them. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is that in America, we're very focused on self-control, self-regulation. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a classroom that is really boring. Like boring. Like you're like, I cannot handle this. I am going to lose it. I'm here to tell you that in the real world, in classrooms, in homes, in schools, emotions are often co-regulated. Think about that right now. I mean, I know that I'm the most engaging speaker you've ever had. So you're all with me. None of you are distracted. You're disagreeing with that? Than me?
Yes.
Get out of my room. My point here is what? That I'm co-responsible for how you feel right now. Does that resonate with people? That leaders of organizations are co-responsible for how people feel in those organizations. Principals of schools are co-responsible for how teachers feel. Teachers are co-responsible for how students feel in those classrooms. Parents are co-responsible for how children feel in their homes. We are co-regulating each other continuously. It's got to be learned. And going back to my opening remark, there's no correctness here. It's about co-exploring and finding what works best for whom in which conditions or which contexts. So I'm going to leave you with a few things. The first is some helpful strategies. We call these the Big Seven sometimes. The first one is kind of a precursor to a strategy. It's the attitudinal piece. It's okay to have my feelings. We're going to give ourselves and everyone we love, and even the people we don't love that much, the permission to feel. Then we got to build those language skills. We got to be self-aware. We got to know how we're feeling. As you probably know from your own life experience, the amount of sleep you get, the type of food you eat, and the amount of physical activity you get all impacts whether or not you deal with your emotions in a helpful or unhelpful way. Again, it's not about me telling you you got to do step aerobics or take walks or do karate or go swimming. It's just that the action of movement is what helps you to deal with your feelings more effectively. You got to learn how to quiet the noise. The whole morning was about the idea that we're spending hours a day scrolling Instagram. Think about that, 500 times a day our adolescents are picking up their telephones, 500 times a day, spending multiple minutes just looking. I mean, imagine how much stimulation is in their brain, how much activity is just like looking at different images all day long. And then we ask people to focus, to be still. Well, we got a lot of practice being scattered, and we got no practice any longer being still, just being. Shifting your thoughts. Raise your hand if you ever engage in self-criticism. Any self-critics in the room? Raise your hand if you have spent an enormous amount of time in your life learning how to be self-compassionate compared to self-critical. Fewer hands are going up. Think about that. I'm going to tell you today that self-criticism is like cancer. It metastasizes in your brain. Every one of us who does self-criticism, I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I'm too tall, I'm too short, my nose is too big, my nose is too small, I'm too dark, I'm too light, whatever it is. And we start rehearsing that and we talk about it and we hear other people defining our reality for us from early childhood. And it grows, 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 and there's millions of branches of that negative self-talk. And then we tell people, we have to be more compassionate to yourself. And we think it's just going to happen overnight. It's life's work. Social support, you got to have an Uncle Marvin. You need that person in your life. And then another big aspect of regulation is just knowing how to spend time. How much space do you give yourself to do things you enjoy, to read, to go for a little walk, to look at the sky? Walking in nature has been shown now in 15,000 studies to help people reduce it. If you live in the city, go look at the molding. I love looking at the molding of buildings in New York City. You know, go to Central Park if you can. Go to another park. Get outside. Just look at something. Look at the ants. Don't look at the rats, because those are kind of gross. So I'm going to end by just sharing a few things. One, we know from our research that this is really important for children. Children who have more developed emotional intelligence just are healthier, they have greater well-being, they perform better academically, they even show up as having better leadership skills. We know from our work with educators that emotional intelligence is highly related to teachers' efficacy, to their well-being, to the climates that they create in their classrooms, to their own stress and burnout levels. We know from our research that when you work for someone who is higher in emotional intelligence, so that leader EI, when the leader is low in emotional intelligence, that's how the teachers feel in the school, that left bubble. When the leader is high in emotional intelligence, it looks like the bubble on the right. How many of you want to feel unsupported, angry, annoyed, disrespected, disappointed? That should be disengaged, not engaged. That's a typo. Worried or pressured. On the right, passionate, accomplished, respected, supported, motivated, valued. It's a huge difference when you think about it. Just briefly looking at this, what research shows is that you as an educator will feel like you're getting more skill acquisition. You have fewer intentions to leave your job, greater job satisfaction, less burnout, more engagement. You're more comfortable speaking up when things go wrong. And you're more ethical in your behavior when you work for someone who displays these skills of emotional intelligence. And even during COVID, what we found in our research is that your occupational well-being and your personal well-being were all related to the skills of your principal. And now I'm told I got to wrap. All right. So, everyone, my last 2 minutes. Everyone's got to do this work, just so you know. Leaders, teachers, students, families, outside of school time. This is what it looks like in a school. That's here in New York City. Asking people how they want to feel. Building that emotion vocabulary, checking in on tools like the mood meter. Creative opportunities in special education and other environments where children aren't typical learners. Artwork. Football fields. thinking about your best self. This boy I love. He said, my best self is kind, hardworking, determined, and selfless. It's pretty remarkable. Tools like the blueprint, which help us build perspective-taking and problem-solving skills. So my last few minutes with you, and I promise I will end now, is that in Connecticut, we've worked with all the different groups to help make Connecticut an emotionally intelligent state. What I'm asking you to think about is, how do we make New York an emotionally intelligent state? So everyone in this room can be co-creating that with us, from teachers' unions to parents' associations, the list goes on. A few things to take away, and we'll send you these slides. If you're interested in learning more about our center's work, you can go to the Ruler website. If you're interested in mental health resources, my friends from the Mental Health Coalition are here today. Check out their website. If you're interested in learning more by reading, you can read my book, Permission to Feel. If you're interested in an app that will help you build your emotional intelligence for free, please take a look at that app. And here's our summary. Everyone, you got to give yourself permission to feel. Raise your hand if you're going to do that. All right, how many of you are going to be a scientist and not a judge? Yes? How many of you are going to accept that this is hard work, we're just going to do it? Yes? If you fail, you're going to be open to apologizing, forgiving, repairing? Yes? All right. How many of you are going to encourage your schools to adopt evidence-based approaches to social and emotional learning? And finally, together, because we can only do this together, maybe, just maybe, we can create schools and communities where children achieve their dreams. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody.